It's time for us to return to the sports stories making their headlines in the newspapers today with the Deputy Sports Editor of The Times, James Restall. So much, James, reflecting on a World Cup final that's taking place a little bit later on. And Wayne Rooney has had his regular column in the Sunday Times. What's he had to say?
Yes, Wayne has shared his stories of playing against Messi in those two Champions League finals with Manchester United in 2009 and 2011. And a couple of really remarkable tales he tells. One being that he only has one football at home that isn't a hat-trick ball that he kept from a match, and it was the match ball from that game in 2011 when he went and got it signed by the three Barcelona goal scorers. Because he says, I know that might sound strange given that we just lost, but I felt I'd just witnessed something quite special.
He was right.
He was. I mean, it was. I remember watching that game at the time and thinking, this is kind of where English football is in the pecking order, because it felt like if this is the best England can produce, and that Manchester United team was pretty good, but they're just a complete league behind what this Barcelona team were doing, and you know that team will go down as one of the all-time great sides. But he also talks about how he was nominated for I think he was in the FIFA Team of the Year alongside Ronaldo and Messi and other members of that Barcelona team, and he said it was so strange standing on stage. You're one of their equals, but also you're in complete awe of them. And he said he wished he'd had the chance to play in that Barcelona team. Because they were just generational talents, and he talks about half time in one of those finals, and thinking, how on earth is this only 1-1? Messi was absolutely destroying them, and he talks about what we mentioned earlier, the one of the iconic moments of this World Cup where he went past Guardiola, and he said he was just doing this time and time again, and that's why I think, and Wayne says here, Wayne tipped Argentina to win the World Cup in his first column at the start of the tournament, and he believes that it's the Messi factor is what can drag them over the line today, and it will. And the other pieces today kind of touch on that as well. The fact that there's an interview with Mario Kempes, and it's kind of in the Mail on Sunday, and he says the same thing. It's the fact that Messi is going to need to drag this team, which is not man for man. It's not. I don't think it's as good or as talented as the France team, but the Messi factor has kind of got them this far, and it could take them all the way.
I was talking about this yesterday. We were saying you couldn't imagine Alvarez and McAllister and Lionel Messi was their forward line, which is a difference from even 6 months ago when Di Maria was in the team. You'd see Dybala could play, and wow, it's complete change, and yet it's fitted for Lionel Messi.
Yeah, it's interesting that it's kind of some of the pieces touch on this today. They say that actually he's benefiting from the fact that he is the clear leader and the one sort of star player, whereas before there've been quite a lot of talented players around, top level players like Sergio Aguero, and it's kind
Di
Maria, exactly. I think the team that started against Croatia in the semi-final, there were only 3 of them that started when they lost in the group stage to Croatia 4 years ago, and Tagliafico, Otamendi and Messi, and you wouldn't have thought Otamendi would still be
not at all.
Heading into a World Cup final. So it's quite incredible, really. It's just whether he can. It's whether it all gets too much, and whether it is a kind of step too far for him. It'll be interesting to see. What do you think, Kaz?
I think France are favourites, and but I want Argentina to win. I got my boy arriving from Paris this morning, and he's got all his French gear on. I'll have to try and get that off him.
I mean, I like this column from Wayne Rooney. I like the fact that he says, when you're out on the pitch, and certainly in his experiences of being alongside Messi, you don't hear him speak. He just leads by how he plays the game. I find that fascinating in itself. Maybe he's not a chatty person out on the pitch. There are some players that are chat all the time. Yeah,
Zidane. No, he
doesn't
talk.
chat.
No,
doesn't chat.
speaks.
Yeah, it's fascinating how there
Jordan
are.
Henderson, the noisiest man on the pitch.
I know. During lockdown, that was a huge surprise when we started hearing more from him. And then I've even heard it this World Cup as well. But I quite like, you mentioned the ball that was signed by Messi and David Villa and Pedro. I like it that he says, but I also signed it as well. Wayne Rooney. I think that's quite sweet because he scored the goal for Manchester. I just think that's quite funny as well.
It's brilliant. Well. Brilliant stuff.
What else should we get to?
Well, I was going to mention the other thing. It was interesting what you said there, Kaz, about the kind of you think France will win, but you want Messi to win. And Deschamps kind of alluded to that in his press conference. There's a piece in the Mail on Sunday from Deschamps' press conference, and he said there are French people who want Messi to win the World Cup. And he said that's kind of what they're up against. Yeah. Is the fact that there's
torn.
Exactly. Some people obviously be supporting France, but then at the same time, you've got to be a pretty cold person to not want this brilliant football story to round itself off.
To tick everything off, basically, that he could have won. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's the romantics in all of us, I suppose, but equally there'll be some people listening in right now going, no, it's not about that. But
where are we going next, James?
I think we should touch on the return of the Premier League. Very briefly.
Yes, we had a little chat about it then.
It does seem it seems very strange that we're going straight into a full set of Boxing Day fixtures. And there's an interview with Jesse Lingard in the Mail on Sunday because he's facing United again with Forest and talks about they've had quite a good mid-season break. I think Forest. I think they beat Valencia. I think in their last friendly, and Lingard played particularly well in that game. So there's a lot of optimism there. Good time as well for them to gel all their new signings. They've added another one. I think there's another player coming in January, so up to 23 or 24
not a surprise,
new players.
So
it'll be interesting to see how they do in the second half of the season, and which teams will have that World Cup hangover. I mean, a lot of pieces looking at how Kane will be back at Spurs. I personally think he'll take out all his frustrations on the Premier League and
don't say that. We're playing them first up. I don't want to hear that. I hope they give him a nice long rest, especially Boxing Day.
James is delighted. Leighton Orient are flying.
That's what it is. It's the Orient-Kane connection, I should have thought. We have to get to this Nick Faldo story in the Sunday Times because I know, Cass, you're particularly keen to talk about it. What's this all about? What's Nick saying?
Yeah, so Nick, the Sunday Times have gone out to interview Nick Faldo at his farm where he now lives in Montana. And he's kind of a guy who was, fair to say, quite an enigma, really, when he was playing golf. And kind of... it remains so. Quite sort of, he's got quite an isolated life now out in the countryside and running his farm, and I think he's having a golf simulator built. Lots of forthright opinions in the piece. Was kind of quite critical of players pursuing the kind of multi-million-dollar paychecks rather than the pursuit of trophies and majors, and kind of dismissed the live golf thing as kind of nothing more than an exhibition. But it was a very entertaining read.
Yeah, it is. And also is that because when he obviously finished his deal with, was it CBS in America? Was it CBS? And he finished his deal. He literally broke down on air. He broke down on air. And this guy, I mean, look, I know someone who wrote his columns, and I also know someone who caddied for him. And they're not very complimentary of Nick. As Paul Hayes has said in the piece, that you describe him as a certain something. So there isn't a lot
not complimentary.
No, not very complimentary. So he obviously he falls foul of a lot of things that people just don't like. And yet he's come across on the media as laughing and making jokes, and the American public have taken to him. And it seems a far cry from everything I've ever been told about him. Obviously it's their opinions telling me, but I know that people have not really enjoyed Nick Faldo as a person, and he seemed to have a different way regards to the media that how he handled his career there. Did it brilliantly, by the way. He was great at analysing golf. Brilliant.
He described himself in the piece as just a big softie. Really, is how he describes himself, and says that it was just all the emotion of his long career kind of got to him in that moment, and he just broke down. Well,
he also, his son caddied for him, didn't he? And he had played the worst golf of his life, and obviously, probably being Nick Faldo, probably told him what was wrong. But I know the guy that caddied for him said he got on the tee on the first hole, basically gave him his club. He said he never spoke to me until we finished the round. So he literally went the whole round with not saying a word to him, like anything about shots, ideas. Just basically gave him clubs and no more.
Wow.
He said he found it really difficult because he knew him personally.
Yeah. I know he talks about he's bemused by the reputation that he has. I mean, I know that I have been in a work situation where he was asked to remove a cap for sponsorship reasons. They want him to remove it, and he flatly refused, and they were like, well, it doesn't help us if you keep the cap on. And he was like, no, I'm keeping it. If you don't want to speak to me, or if you want to speak to me, sorry, I'm going to have the cap on. So that it's just little things like that didn't help necessarily, but people change, so we'll give him the benefit of the doubt that maybe he's mellowed. But do you remember there was an
it on
article.
the minutes when he people would phone, say like a radio interview, and you say, right, what time are you on? You say, we're coming to you at 7:07, and he'd be like, well, it needs to be 7:07.
Don't ring me before
Not
then.
7:08 or 7:06.
But we have to remember he's had an incredible golfing career, 6 majors, 3 masters.
Yeah.
Fabulous career. But I'm pretty sure there was an article earlier this year, or maybe last year even, Cass, talking about Nick Faldo and about the marriages and everything. And wasn't there one where he said, I was married...
Oh, yeah.
Married for like 4 years, but only 6 months were happily, or something like that.
No, he said, I was married for 4 years, but really... It
should have been 2.
It only should have been 2. No, 6 months. I think he said 6 months.
Something like that. It was bizarre, but very open about it all in that article. That was a few months ago. But another intriguing one in the Sunday Times. Loads of fascinating stories. Plenty of coverage on the Gareth Southgate story as well. James, appreciate you popping in and helping us go through the papers. Much obliged.
Pleasure.